Good morning, everybody. I'm thrilled to be here hosting this panel. I actually did one of these last year on well-being, kind of a similar discussion, and I actually did it without having a voice at all. I kind of just scratched my voice through the whole thing, so this is a much better situation for me, especially. Before we get started, I wanted to kind of go down the line and have everybody introduce themselves. And first and foremost, tell us, your name, where you're from, and also what you do personally to help your own well-being in the workplace. Sorry, Elena.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Helena Deal. I'm the Vice President of Human Resources at Hess Corporation. What do I do for wellness? There's probably not a lot. So I was thinking at work is actually go and find someone I don't know and try and engage in conversation. I actually get quite a lot of energy from meeting new people or just listening to what's happening in their day.
Hi, everybody. My name is Cheryl Nienhuis, and I am the Director for the Health and Welfare Programs at Mayo Clinic. And from a wellness perspective, I just feel like I am blessed that I get the opportunity to take care of all of our employees and their loved ones so they can take care of our patients. So it energizes me.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nikhil, Shahane, and I'm the Vice President People Development for TechnipFMC. How I take care of well-being at work, I think it's the ordinary things. If we take care of the ordinary, the extraordinary will take care of itself. So I think, to me, having fun at work and enjoying what I do and enjoying every moment of how we engage with people is what I love about my job, and that's how I look at well-being, my own well-being.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Kelly Oliphant. I'm the Vice President of Talent and Organizational Development and Learning with Memorial Hermann. How I take care of well-being at work, I'd say for myself, I put the mask on myself first. I do try to work out in the morning to give myself the right mindset and energy. And then with my team, I think it's just having fun and connecting. Sometimes that involves wine, sometimes it involves games, but just having fun together as a group.
Hi, good morning. I'm Sarah Zemer. I'm with Moby. I have the pleasure to serve as the Senior Vice President of Sales. And the message transcends. We have fun with our team. If you work hard, you have to play hard too. So we do Irish dancing. There is a little bit of wine, but being relatable, being a human first, the days of people wanting to be managed are over. So just, being myself and helping them know they can be themselves as well.
Nikhil, I'm actually really interested in what you said about kind of the ordinary versus the extraordinary. I guess, can you kind of flesh that out? What does that look like, and what is the ordinary versus the extraordinary?
Yeah, certainly. So I'll share a recent experience. We talk about inspiration and how leaders inspire us. And very often we look at senior leaders, executive leaders, ELT. Interestingly, on the 2nd of Jan, when I walked into our campus at Graham, I was inspired by the lady who brews coffee at Starbucks, because she's always cheerful, and she was wearing this funny looking t-shirt which was very apt for 2nd of Jan. And the way she engaged with me, I really thought this lady is so cheerful and positive every day. And I posted on Viva Engage as to how she is my inspiration. It was that small moment that small moment of interaction that was really inspirational for me. And it resonated with people, because people are always talking about ELTs and senior leaders, but inspiration comes from every leader, every person in the organization, and leadership is across the organization. So this realization is very important.
And that also speaks to kind of what you were talking about, Sarah, with relatability. I guess how does relatability play into kind of those day-to-day interactions?
Absolutely.
I think that old adage, people don't care about how much you know until they know about how much you care. And that goes, by inspiring people with day-to-day things that you can see and seem human. And right now, especially with the prevalence of mental health, and we're reducing the stigma. And I was talking to some fun ladies this morning about how the HR benefits seems to be the place everyone goes because it's trusting, but you can't be everything to everyone. And so helping managers and leadership team members have that same connection means we have to be relatable as well. And we also have to be knowledgeable about all the benefits that are available in the ecosystem so that we can help HR benefit leaders do their job and say, hey, did you know you have access to, yes, an EAP, but other solutions as well, so you're supporting them as well as HR.
And how does kind of compassionate leadership mesh with the needs of that everyday work? How do you train your managers to come to that?
Is that one for me?
Yeah, sure. Continue.
It leads with empathy, right? Especially now, it's not just millennials that want that. Everyone needs to be empathetic. And you have to balance that with accountability, and that is hard. And so the first thing is, how do you train managers to do that? And I've seen organizations across the board investing here. Again, so it's not just relying on the vendor, it's not just relying, on HR benefits. It's helping managers how to balance empathy with accountability. And compassion starts with how are you doing? It's that simple question of asking people before I start a weekly one-on-one is, tell me how's your week gone? How are you personally doing? What are you dealing with outside of work? Because then people know you care.
And how do you kind of balance, or how do you communicate the needs of those workers with stressed out managers who just need somebody to get the job done, who are dealing with generational differences, who are dealing with diversity differences, things like that?
I think it starts at the top with the culture of the organization. The organization can't just go into crisis management and try and support people when there's a crisis. It has to be embedded in the culture that people feel supported from the front end. And I know all of you are likely doing that work. I see just that changing across corporate America, that now it's an expectation that you have to be compassionate, you have to support people, and then they're going to show up and want to do good work because they feel cared for.
And kind of over the last few years, there's also been an increased focus on resilience to that end. Even some pushback from people who have differing abilities, who need to bounce back from adversity. So, Kelly, among your leaders, what's a healthy way to approach the resilience factor, especially when engaging with larger diverse groups?
Yeah, so this has been a conversation that we've been talking about a lot. We have our HR team, we have our wellness group looking at resiliency, and one of the things that we've been talking about is this, I think, misperception around what resiliency is. We talk about the ability to bounce back, and I think we have to start having the conversation that resiliency is not your ability to bounce back. You might not actually return to where you were, and so how do we get people to understand you're on a journey, and do that with authentic leadership? And so we've really started to talk to our leaders. How do you build trust through authenticity and compassion? How do you share your story? How do you share your failures, your struggles? Because through showing that vulnerability, I think that actually builds resilience. It's part of the growth and the evolution. You may not return to who you were, but being able to talk through that story of how you've grown, how you've evolved, and resiliency is really kind of the place you end up because of the situation you went through. And so kind of getting away from this mindset that you can return after a crisis, especially in healthcare. We don't expect our nurses, our physicians to return to who they were, but how do we navigate the new normal in that journey? And so I think authenticity, the ability to be vulnerable with your people is one of the things that we're trying to talk about with our leaders.
And Cheryl, how do you walk through a crisis? How do you kind of help build that resiliency?
So I think it's, you mentioned the vulnerability part of it, right? I think we've really experienced a lot since the pandemic and a lot of burnout, right? In healthcare, specifically, more assaults have increased with our providers and with our nurses and everyone, and just really building up the support internally and with each other from teamwork to really focus in on how can I help my colleague. And I think even with the remote work, right, giving people that are stressed out, feels like there's more work, there's staff shortages and things, the okay to walk away and creating that resource, right? Like how can a nurse back up another nurse that just went through something or is dealing with a difficult patient or just got some news that they didn't want to hear? So really creating that, it's okay to walk away and just take a few minutes to go for a walk or to go get coffee, right? Because sometimes we're missing some of that people connection with colleagues and everything. And so being okay to do that little thing of just stepping away for 10 minutes, as simple as that sounds, to really do that. And then just having the training and the additional resources to connect with those individuals and going through it, from stronger EAP and behavioral health solutions to the simple thing of canine companions coming to visit our departments to really just give those extra snuggles. So without judgment. So
And do you struggle? Do you have conversations with managers who are struggling to allow people to step away? Like they feel like they can't afford that 10 minutes?
Yes, we are, and it's so awkward. So, personal story, I was meeting with a cardiologist, and we were talking about exercise and everything, and I'm like, how do you do that? You know, I'm on Zoom all the time and barely get to go to a restroom break and then come back for my next meeting. And she's like, do you have a treadmill? And I'm like, yes. She's like, do it on your meeting. I'm like, what? And I'm like, she's like, what else do you have? I'm like, a stationary bike. She's like, write it on your, and she's like, we need to change that perception, right? That you have to be front and center all the time. And so starting to do that on some of the calls and everything. But for me and my team, one of the things that I did is, do we always have to be on a call in front of the camera all the time? And so there's times when I've actually said, you know what, we're taking this call through a conference call, and I want you to go and take that time away to change your laundry out or to go for a walk. And so changing it internally and starting that it's okay, you know, and really giving that. And I think our leadership really focuses in on joy in the workplace. And that does come from our leadership down. So giving our managers the permission to think outside the box. We actually even have initiatives where we allow funding for different departments to kind of do that and give that okay to create that environment where people can step away and be okay with it and not penalize them or reprimand them, because it's healthier for them and better outcomes.
And Sarah, where does Irish step dancing play into that conversation?
Well, it is about having fun and supporting other people's talent. We just have a member of our team that does that, and so he wanted to do it for us. But the thing about burnout, what you made me think of, particularly in healthcare, remember my mom was a OBGYN nurse, and at the time I was working for a fitness company that would do on-site group fitness or massage. And I'm like, Mom, we're going to be there. You can get away from the stress of your job. And she's like, I'm helping women in labor. I can't leave this to go get a massage. She's like, that's for the admin people. So I love to hear you talking about how, building that into someone's day so it's not just a certain class of people that are getting that. Everybody can Irish dance.
That's right.
So that makes a big difference when people feel like it's permissible. Or a walking meeting. One of the things that I think more companies need to think of, it's a simple thing but would make a profound difference, is if you're on Zoom calls all day, every day, stop at 55 and start at 05. Give people a little bit of a window to use the restroom, to get some water. Because what happens is they're back to back to back to back, and we're all like, be right back, be right there. And you're like, I need time to process as a human what we just talked about, and then come a little refreshed to the next meeting. How many of you do that today? Does your company support that? I mean, I just see a couple, but don't we all think it would make such a big difference?
And honor that, right? Be that person that's like, okay, we're at time, right? So, which will feel really awkward.
Yeah, and I think if I may add, the learnings from COVID, and as we came out of COVID, we have carried it into the way of work today, right? The hybrid work. It's okay to be not okay. It's okay for you to attend to your dog or your kids. And I think for every organization to value that is really important. We should not go back to the olden days, We are in hybrid work. We should respect individuals. We got to know our people much better during those 2 years than we ever did. And I think within our organization, we are making a conscious effort to make people feel comfortable and be open enough to have that kind of a dialogue. That's flexibility is important.
And I would add that when I used to do some coaching of up and coming executive women, but I think this applies to everyone, is be intentional in blocking your calendar. I would coach somebody, think about your brand, how you want to show up in your meeting. And so take 30 minutes before that meeting to kind of review, what do you want to say? How do you want to show up? But I think as we go into wellness, it's the same thing. If you're stressed and you're burned out, that's going to become part of your brand. And so take that time, whether it's 10 minutes or even 30 minutes, to just think about, how do I want to show up? How do I want to reset? And whether it's from, taking that time to think about what you want to say, or just taking that time to wind down. I think over time, if you're stressed and you're burned out, that's going to emanate to your team, and that's going to start to set the tone. And so you can be really intentional with that.
I think companies are running so lean right now and they're downsizing that is the balance is where do you feel comfortable to say, I'm at capacity, I can't take on any more? Because you feel if you do say that, or even, truth be told, I just got a walking tread and for my New Year's, that was for myself. I'm like, I'm not gonna sit all day, I'm gonna stand. But I work for a well-being company and I feel a little bit like, is this okay that I'm standing here? Do they think I'm still paying attention? And of course it's okay. But I had to get myself over that hump. And what you're saying is like you're blocking yourself out. I still feel a little bit like I need to be available at all times. So it's a shift.
Yeah. And some days I do the back-to-back Zooms. So, I think it's like we have to give ourselves grace too. Some days we don't get it right and some days we do better than others. But I think when your team can see you trying, they go, okay, there's space for me to start to do this as well.
I know a big part of this conversation, a big part of pretty much every work conversation is stress, crisis, things like that. In a time when disruption is the goal of many industries, these kind of tectonic shifts to meet a company's aims can cause a lot of uncertainty in the office. My industry specifically is dealing with a whole lot of layoffs kind of universally across the board. We're doing great. Houston Chronicle's doing great. Please read us. But at the same time, I know, Helena, your company is going through a major merger and acquisition right now that we talked about this morning that could potentially kind of transform the longstanding culture at Hess. How do you focus on kind of well-being with your employees amid all of this?
In October, you come to work and we've been an independent oil company for 90 years, so we have a proud history, and you wake up or it was actually the night before, sort of told, we're going to be sold. And so then your care is then for me, sort of, particularly your immediate people around you and your function. We talk about being a family at work, as I'm sure many companies do, but it suddenly comes very much into that sort of the individual stress. People are sobbing, they're tearful, they don't know. Many of our employees are the major breadwinners in their family, and they've got that responsibility of sort of financial as well. So this is not an immediate thing for us. We're under sort of FTC reviews and things like that. So it's a very complex process. It's a $57 billion deal. So this is not going to happen. So we've now got this prolonged time of anxiety, tension in the organization, uncertainty. So you try and do all, and everything the panel has been saying, I would completely echo, but we've now layered on something that's completely outside of everybody's control. And it's dealing with that uncertainty. So what we're saying to leaders is, first of all, it's about how do we get messaging out? There's a lot of, we were saying earlier about information in the media. Everybody's Googling every deal that Chevron has done. So they've all got their information. Information is also, when people say, oh, something's confidential, the amount of stuff that has been texted around about severance packages, selection protocols. So you're trying to then deal with it, and none of it is actually relevant necessarily to what will happen to us. So what we're dealing with is leadership, and literally I was sitting in the car before I came in here, sort of senior leaders, president of the company, are trying to say, here's some of the messages, and they'll also be doing sessions. That was with the leadership team, and then tomorrow directly to employees. So how do we not have misinformation going? Because when people have misinformation, that creates it's that corridor gossip and et cetera that goes wrong. So it's also, when we talk about authentic leadership, it's very well to ask someone, how are you doing? But I think the other piece of it I would add to that is listen to the answer. It shouldn't just be, oh my goodness, they're ticking the box, they've gone through their authentic leadership training, and they know they have to ask me how I am. I would also encourage that you pause and you wait for the answer and you actually listen to that answer. Because that's how you get to, as we've talked about, how do you know your people, and how do you start to see if something's out of character for someone, if they just start to behave in a meeting or they do something. So we're trying to say to our leaders, look out for signs that are not typical of that individual. As we said, give people grace, give them a moment. And it may be that everything went wrong on the school run or picking something up, or we've got a lot of people here dealing with aging parents, young kids at school, and various things like that. So just that others, I'm sure, are having similar, like COVID, we were talking earlier about coming in and working in the COVID environment. I think it's just, not just ask people how they are, listen to the answer, try and watch for patterns where someone is doing something out of character and create space for that, as you're saying, in your Outlook calendar and stuff like that. Be very purposeful and very intentional, because for us, it's not going to be a short time. This is actually going to be a long journey ahead of us. So I don't know if that helps.
Helena, you've talked about the culture at Hess being quote unquote genuinely nice.
Yeah.
Does that kind of all go out the window in these types of situations, or?
No, I'd actually say it's being amplified at the moment. I think people, we're small enough. We're less than 2,000 employees and about 3,500 contractors. So we know people. And I think there is a lot of people trying to check in, people understanding how they are, what they're doing. So I think it sounds really trite, but being nice to people and being pleasant to people actually makes a nicer work environment. It makes people less stressed and better wellness. So that hello, how are you? Those not always being on the phone and taking that moment to look up and actually look someone in the face and be genuine and purposeful about your questioning, I think creates a much healthier environment. So at the moment, no, but we are reminding people, like, please be purposeful about what you do.
I was going to say, yeah, kindness and respect can go a long way, but also I think competition, especially internally, can kind of breed some contempt. I don't know if any of you have dealing with some of those factors of the tension and the uncertainty that's caused amid kind of a disruption within your workplace.
I mean, I can jump in and say not exactly with that, but kind of piggybacking on Helena's, working in healthcare, coming out of COVID, we have a workforce that's been really challenged, their mental health, their resiliency. We do have a workforce that has PTSD from going through COVID, and they're also still dealing with workplace safety issues and mental health. And so we have actually rolled out a program called Code Lilac across all of our organizations, and it's really a program that is around peer support. So how do we train and upskill people to recognize within their coworkers signs of stress and mental illness? If they have an event at work where they lose a patient, or they just have a workplace safety issue or anything that might trigger a mental health response, they're trained to kind of question and intervene in a really safe space. They're also trained to kind of know if they need to escalate it up to one of our wellness counselors or something to intervene. And so we've had really, really positive results from that. I mean, we have had some suicides and other issues within healthcare. And what we found is we've gotten a really great response from this, that peers are now able to recognize signs of mental distress and appropriately intervene, whereas I think before they didn't really know what to do. They saw somebody in stress and they didn't know how to support that person. And so that has been very successful, coupled with EAP and our wellness programs, to really get peers actively engaged in supporting each other through events and mental health. And then I would say on the HR side, so one of the things that we've done on the HR side is we just have a monthly meeting with all of our HR just to connect and hear each other. I would say, in a healthcare environment, when you're in HR, you're always putting the mask on other people. And it's kind of hard to say, we're struggling too, to support the organization. And so our leadership has taken a really intentional stance to say, we're going to have a safe space for people to come together and say, what's on your mind? What are you challenged with right now? What are you struggling with? And just openly talk. And that's helped us as an HR team, not just to hear what's going on in the business, how things are working, but what's going on with our HR team as well.
I know so much of the conversation around well-being centers on physical health, fitness, nutrition, things like that. But obviously a lot of people have complicated issues, chronic conditions, and they don't feel like they can engage in those programs. Cheryl, how does your company kind of help meet people kind of where they are, how they live, things like that?
Yeah, so great question. I think, as Mayo Clinic, from our benefit design standpoint, we have given all of our employees access to Mayo Clinic care, which is really important. And that includes even the people that have gone remote. I think, what we're seeing in our plan design is great. However, there's so many people from a well-being standpoint that gets missed and not engaged. And those people tend to be the 6 to 8 or the percent of people that are chronically ill or dealing with a serious condition. And it's really hard for them to get access to quality care. And they're the people that aren't able to get engaged into our wellness initiatives. And so yet they're costing 60 to 80% of our medical plan costs, right? Which we all see and kind of have to regain our breath and composure when we see those numbers. But so I think having that customizable centers of excellence for those individuals and incorporating that into your wellness strategy is so important, because these are the people that need it most, right? So an example would be our financial well-being initiatives that have really come out since COVID. It's like, that's great, but do these people know that this service even exists, right? So really talking through and making sure that coordination of your well-being initiative also is addressing those people that are individually dealing with chronic and serious conditions. I mean, thinking of cancer as an example, how many people struggle with cancer? It's one of the top spends within an organization, yet more and more people, thankfully, because great places in healthcare have more solutions, but people are living longer with cancer or with GI issues. And so I think it's really important to see from a benefit design standpoint, one, how can we proactively reach out to these individuals to make sure they're getting the diagnosis and the care they need? Because these are the people that are costing us the most, yet they can't afford to engage in our health and welfare programs and engage in our well-being programs because they're just trying to survive, right? I mean, literally. And so really creating the programs and working with our vendors to early identify these individuals, incorporate it in our well-being strategies, making sure that our vendors are being held accountable because of our PMPMs and everything that they're charging us with. Do they even know what our other vendors are doing? Do they even know that our well-being solution has a financial component to it? Do they know that we have a customized centers of excellence or a COE that deals with things like cancer? So I think it's bringing all of our benefit design together and incorporating it into our well-being strategies too, to make sure that we're meeting these people where they are within their healthcare journey, because people who are well tend to be the ones participating in our well-being strategies. People who are not engaging are the ones that need it most, and we need to reach out to them and meet them where they are. So I think that's really important in what we're doing.
And Sarah, how do you get people to engage in those programs?
You're completely spot on. I mean, I was talking to people at breakfast this morning and at our booth. People are tired of being approached as everything about you is diabetes, everything about you is hypertension. When a whole person approach, what you're describing, yes, all of this is about caring, but the fine line is it's not just pushing a digital solution. They need people to support them, people, humans. Yes, digital can have an impact. So we focus on a targeted approach. And I think that's sort of what I hear you leaning into is you can have all the solutions out there, but for these people that are struggling, what we find is less than 3, the most we've seen is 5% in an overlap analysis are actually engaged in the well-being, in the financial solutions, because they're at the doctor all the time. So how can you proactively reach out, find a vendor that will reach out to those people who are struggling? In our case, it's about 20% of the population that are driving 40 to 50% of overall spend, and they're struggling, they're complex. And yes, maybe they need to get to diabetes, but their first issue is they're in pain, they can't sleep. So don't talk to them about physical activity because these other things need to be, they need help with that first. They need support with that first. And so kudos, and I love your code Lilac. That's amazing because then they feel supported and can talk about the other things.
So I think too what's important, and I want to challenge all of you in doing this, is really talk to your vendors and see, do they know what the other vendors that you're offering offer? Right? And almost do like a vendor summit to kind of say, do you know EAP, mental health, behavioral health? Do you know that if someone is struggling with cancer, we offer cancer centers of excellence, right? Do you know that we have a financial component to our well-being strategy? And really think about things like that as you're talking with your vendors and hold them accountable to make sure that their teams are trained and know about the other services that you have to make sure that that whole person is getting the help. So even if they don't hear about something from a cancer benefit standpoint, they know that, I'm going to call my EAP because my colleague told me about it in this Code Lilac program, right? And so they call that EAP to talk about cancer. That EAP person can say, did you know that X company, that your company offers a cancer COA benefit? Please call this number to find out more, right? It's a simple connection for that person.
You're 100% right. We recently did a vendor summit because one of the things that we discovered in talking to our people is that you don't know about all the benefits available. Sometimes you're only engaged in one aspect of your benefits and you don't know, let's say for example, you're going back to school and you're working on your degree and you're talking to your coach that's helping to navigate you through your career path, but you're talking about other challenges that are happening in your life that may potentially impact your success in completing that degree program or that certification program. And one of the things that we found is oftentimes people don't know what's available to them. They might occasionally get the email, but unless it's top of mind in that moment, you forget about that email. And so the vendor summit was really around how do we rebrand, rethink our benefits to be more about the whole person and what they might need and better connect the dots across our benefits. So I think that that's a really good call because that's one of the gaps that we were finding and just utilization and awareness of all of the benefits that we offer our employees.
On the other side of that, what advice do you have for employers who are sorting through all the options while trying to be empathetic and inclusive for their employees and kind of dealing with point solution fatigue?
So I'll go ahead and start, but so that point solution fatigue, where are they going, right? Do you have a platform that's there, right? And especially too, talking through some of the vended solutions and everything. I mean, we have so much remote workers that are non-clinical, and I'm sure most of you or a lot of you during COVID kind of transition those people or have hybrid workers. And so it's really giving them the platform and the access to that care that's really, really important. We are looking at, from our preventive care structure, are we meeting the needs there? Because we want everybody to get the healthcare that they need and meet that demographic, right? There's varying demographics out there. So I think it's like, how do we meet them where they are again, and listening to what our employees are asking for, because it just becomes muddy water to them, right? So really encouraging, meeting them where they're at. Are we providing them access to the right quality care and telling them about it? So I think steps like that and bringing it all to one platform or one communication tool, or even multiple communications that's steering to one area of focus is really important and key to remove that.
We've been told by hundreds of consultants and prospects that this has been the last 18 months of the great reevaluation, that they threw all these point solutions at company or at their employees during COVID just to give them additional support. But then there was great fatigue that followed. And so they're reevaluating predominantly who's engaging. Is it less than 5%? It's probably not making an impact unless it's a case rate type of situation. But also, surveying employees, integrating solutions, and making sure that they generate an ROI or an outcome. That just getting a little bit of engagement isn't enough anymore. So there's this essence of skin in the game, which I think is super important.
And I think, if I may add, right now people are inundated with information. And one of the things that we have decided is to look at a holistic communications approach. You're doing something in well-being, something in talent, something is in learning, and people are constantly receiving information. So take the lean approach and eliminate whatever doesn't add value. So, we have started applying the lean approach to literally everything, saying, does this add value? Is it waste? First, eliminate it. And I think the opportunity of meeting people in person, as you said, it's definitely there because, again, we have become too digital. I think we need to be digital, but people out on field, I'm sure with Helena and our organization, people are out on the field. They need to be there in person, and managers need to do a better job as well. So I think the power of one-to-one conversations and managers being able to identify if there's an issue with an individual, I think those things, going back to the basics, is really important. But again, we are prioritizing big time and eliminating waste and trying to see what are we going to communicate this month and this week, and can we not communicate more than two major, blast points. So I think that's really important to get people's attention.
I think there's an element around when you say that so much is that if it's too generic, that we're finding, and I think a lot of companies are doing work with personas and things like that, that our folks who are on offshore platforms for 14 days or in the field have a very different environment than if you're sitting here in Houston. And I think that companies are going to have to get more, in a sense, targeted, because there's so much irrelevancy out there that people just turn it off and then they tune out and then they don't leverage a lot of the good things that are there. So I do think that hopefully some of the technology and the advances there can actually make us more relevant to the communities that we need to give value to.
I'm so inspired to give people their time back, but I do have one more question. Things like quiet quitting, bare minimum Mondays, setting boundaries are all kind of in the zeitgeist now. They're both written about by writers like me. They're parodied on social media, things like that. I guess I'm wondering which of these are kind of positive and which of these have been negative in the conversations you've had, and are we becoming more humane as an American work culture?
So I guess I'll start there. I think that in some way they're all positive. We need to be talking about them. So I think the more that we're talking about the phenomenon, what our employees are facing, it's going to be positive. There's always a buzzword. I don't know if quiet quitting is necessarily a new concept. I think we've been talking about levels of engagement for a long time, but I think what's starting to shift is that discretionary effort is not owed to the organization. And people are starting to say, I have the ability to do discretionary effort, but you can't get that from me. I don't owe that to you. And maybe I want to give that discretionary effort somewhere else. And so it's really creating a mindset shift with organizations around how do we keep people engaged, and do we really get to tap into that discretionary effort? Maybe what's important to that person is putting discretionary effort to their personal life. And so I think we're having to really look at people, we've talked about it a lot, as whole people and acknowledge them where they're at. And so I think there's been a shift. We've talked about work-life balance for a long time. I think that is off the table. There is no balance. It's really around flexibility and integration. It's how do you lean in when you can, and how do you pull back, and how do we as organizations embrace that when people need to pull back and give them the resources and the space to honor that in that moment they need to pull back, spend time with their families. And so I think we are really looking at flexible work environments. From how do you personalize it? It's not about rolling out a one-size-fits-all flex program. I think what we're really saying is how do we create adaptability and agility within our organization and capability within our leaders to allow employees to lean in and pull back when they need to, and equip our leaders to have those conversations, because we have many people that leaders like those black and white rules. They want something that's easy to follow. And so I think it's about building capability in our leaders to navigate those conversations and know how to help people lean in and pull back. And so I don't know that I exactly got to your question, but I do think it comes back to that authentic leadership and building capabilities in leaders to know you don't need a policy. You don't need a flex work situation to help somebody do their best at work and sometimes do their best at home. And so I think that's where we're really navigating, is building the skill sets in our leaders to do that.
And I think it starts with us, right? And encourage those leaders, like, okay, give them that flexibility. Or if they call in, start with your heart, right? And don't judge, right? We don't know their story. We don't know what's really happening behind the scenes other than what they're sharing with us. And so making sure that they're not feeling that judgment and they're starting to feel like it's a safe space, right? That I can give them that, take that flexibility, and my leader and my manager is not going to be judging me like, oh yeah, I wish I could do that, but I have too much to do, right? Stop that inward thought as well, and be okay, right? And safely draw that line.
Yeah, I totally agree. And one thing that I would add is, and we talked a bit, bits and pieces about it, is, this environment where people can open up and share their concerns, right? We talk about psychological safety. Some of the things that you mentioned, you're upskilling your managers, is psychological safety. We had one instance where we are trying last couple of years, 3 years, and we had people on Mental Health Awareness Month in the month of October, a couple of people sharing really personal stories on Viva Engage, saying that 3 years back in this company, I'll never open up and share this personal story. But now I feel comfortable. And that kind of started more people sharing and opening up. So I think we need to create this culture where people feel psychologically safe to open up, and then in parallel keep upskilling managers to anticipate and keep adapting as an organization. I mean, talking to how corporate America is going to change or human-centric leadership, I think every organization needs to adapt because change is here. We can't make a decision on what hybrid work looks like today. I mean, we know what it is today, but we cannot predict tomorrow. And the successful organization will always be more agile and be ready to adapt, as opposed to taking a stand that this is what it is and this is what it will remain.
Great. I think that's a great place to end. I really want to everybody thank our panelists today.